You're about to become something you once feared. There comes a point in an empath's life where being good starts costing too much. And most people never talk about that part. They talk about your heart, your compassion, your ability to understand people when nobody else could. But they never talk about what it cost you to become that person. How many times you stayed quiet to keep peace? How many times you carried energy that was never yours? How many times you walked into a room feeling fine and walked out feeling heavy for reasons you couldn't explain? But something is changing now. And this is where your comeback begins. Most empaths don't rise when life gets easier. They rise when something finally breaks inside them, not their spirit, their loyalty. Because for a long time, you kept giving chances to people who already showed you who they were. You kept explaining, forgiving, understanding, waiting, believing that if you loved harder, people would eventually become who they pretended to be. But then something happened. Maybe it was realizing you were always remembered when someone needed healing, but somehow forgotten when you needed the same. And that pain, it didn't destroy you, it destroyed the illusion. What most people don't understand is that while everyone thought the empath was just hurting, something much deeper was happening. You weren't just going through pain, you were studying human nature in real time. Every betrayal, every half-truth, every guilt trip, and every moment where someone's words didn't match their intentions was teaching you something most people never learn. Because when you feel deeply, you start noticing patterns other people miss. You begin seeing the difference between someone who genuinely needs love and someone who simply needs access to your energy. You start realizing that people can say all the right things while consistently showing you something completely different through their actions. And without even realizing it, your pain was sharpening your discernment. It was teaching you to stop listening only to what people say and start paying attention to what they repeatedly do. Pain becomes power the moment it teaches you what peace cannot. That's why you're changing now. You're not reacting the same, trusting the same, or giving endless chances the same. Because the empath who once saw the good in everyone is now learning to see the truth in everyone. And that changes everything. There's something most spiritual conversations avoid talking about. People will tell you to keep giving, keep loving, and keep forgiving. But almost nobody talks about what happens when someone spends years pouring into others while receiving almost nothing in return. And here's the truth. Life keeps score. Not in a bitter way, but in a way that is far more precise than most people realize. Every time you showed up for someone when you were running on empty, every time you gave your energy while carrying your own pain, and every time you stayed loyal when it would have been easier to become cold, none of that disappeared. Energy doesn't vanish. It accumulates. And for many empaths, what's happening right now isn't luck or random timing. It's balance. It's life finally returning what was never properly received. The universe doesn't forget what people overlooked. The peace that's coming, the relationships that feel safer, the opportunities that start appearing, none of that is extra. For the empath, it's owed. And sometimes the hardest part of the comeback isn't giving anymore. It's finally allowing yourself to receive without guilt. One of the biggest mistakes an empath can make is believing that every painful relationship in their life was just bad luck, or that they simply kept attracting the wrong people. But if you look closely, the people who drained you didn't just take your energy. They exposed something. They revealed the places where you were abandoning yourself without even realizing it. The person who constantly crossed your boundaries didn't create that pattern. They found a place where you were afraid to say no. The person who kept taking your time, your loyalty, and your energy without giving the same back didn't create your exhaustion. They revealed where you were confusing self-sacrifice with love. That's why some of the most draining people in your life weren't random. They were mirrors. Every manipulative person, every emotionally unavailable person, every person who only showed up when they needed something was revealing a part of you that still believed your worth had to be earned. And that's why your comeback doesn't begin with anger. It begins with awareness. It begins when you stop asking, "Why did they do that to me?" and start asking, "Why did I keep leaving that door open?" Some people don't enter your life to love you. They enter your life to show you where you stopped loving yourself. And once an empath understands that, those people stop looking like losses and start looking like lessons. One of the strangest parts of an empath's comeback is that most people don't notice it when it begins. There's no big announcement, no dramatic speech, and no need to prove anything. From the outside, it can look like nothing changed at all. But underneath the surface, something has shifted so deeply that people begin feeling it before they understand it. Because the truth is, empaths have been doing emotional work for people their entire lives without anyone fully noticing. You were the one calming tense rooms, keeping conversations alive, and sensing what nobody wanted to say out loud. You made people feel understood, safe, and seen even when nobody was doing the same for you. And because that kind of presence is invisible, people start assuming it will always be there. They assume your patience is endless. They assume your energy will keep holding everything together until one day it doesn't. And that's when people begin to feel something they can't explain. Conversations feel colder. Friendships feel heavier. Spaces lose their warmth and people start wondering why things suddenly feel different. Not realizing the energy that was holding everything together quietly stepped back. Your presence was never ordinary. People just got used to it. And this is where the empath's comeback becomes real. When your absence starts teaching people what your presence was doing the whole time. And now I welcome you to today's comment. If it is out of your hands, it deserves freedom from your mind, too. A lot of people keep carrying things they no longer have control over. Old conversations, mistiming, other people's choices, outcomes they can't change. And even when it's no longer in their hands, it's still living rentree in their mind. But this is a reminder. Not everything needs to be solved. Some things need to be released. And sometimes peace begins the moment you stop mentally holding what life already asked you to let go of. Thank you for sharing. For most of their life, empaths have been told that their greatest gift is compassion. People admire how deeply you care, how naturally you understand others, and how easily you can make people feel seen, heard, and understood. And while all of that is true, what most people, including empaths themselves, fail to realize is that compassion was never the real gift. Compassion was only the visible part of something much deeper that has been operating inside you the entire time. Because if you really look back at your life, you'll notice something strange. Long before people showed you who they really were, a part of you already knew. Before the betrayal happened, before the lies were exposed, before the friendship started feeling heavy, something inside you was already picking up on it. You noticed the smile that didn't feel genuine. You noticed the praise that somehow carried quiet competition behind it. You noticed affection that only appeared when someone needed access to you. And the truth is, you weren't imagining any of it. You were reading patterns. That's the real gift of an empath, not just feeling deeply, but seeing deeply. Seeing what people say, what they show, and noticing when their energy tells a completely different story. Most people hear words. Empaths notice inconsistencies. The problem was never your intuition. The problem was what happened after your intuition spoke. You sensed the red flags but explained them away. You noticed the jealousy but convinced yourself you were overthinking. You felt something was off but kept giving chances to people your spirit had already warned you about. And that's where the comeback truly begins. Not when you become stronger, but when you stop betraying what you already know. The most dangerous empath is not the one who feels everything. It's the one who finally trusts what they feel. One of the most satisfying parts of an empath's comeback isn't the success, the recognition, or even the peace that starts entering their life. It's something much quieter than that, but far more powerful. It's the moment manipulative people realize that the version of you they used to control doesn't exist anymore. Because for years, people who operated through guilt, confusion, emotional pressure, and subtle mind games often found empaths easy to influence. Not because empaths were weak, but because they cared so deeply that they were always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. If someone gave them the silent treatment, they assumed they did something wrong and rushed to fix it. If someone twisted the story and made themselves the victim, the empath immediately started questioning their own memory. If someone pulled away emotionally, acted cold, or started becoming distant, the empath often felt responsible for restoring peace, even when they weren't the one who created the problem in the first place. And manipulators notice that. They notice who apologizes too quickly. They notice who feels guilty too easily. They notice who keeps trying to fix things even when they're the one being hurt. They study emotional people the same way emotional people study them. But what happens when the empath starts seeing the pattern? What happens when the silent treatment no longer creates panic but clarity? What happens when guilt stops working because you're no longer afraid of disappointing people who were never fair to begin with? What happens when someone tries to twist your words, shift blame, rewrite the story, or make you question what happened? And instead of doubting yourself, you calmly recognize exactly what's happening in real time. That's when the game changes because manipulators don't lose power when you confront them. They lose power when their tactics stop creating the emotional reaction they were feeding on. Control only works on the version of you that still needs approval, and that realization changes everything for an empath. Suddenly, the people who used to intimidate you start feeling smaller. The people who used to confuse you become predictable. The guilt trips that once kept you awake at night start sounding rehearsed. The emotional traps, the blame shifting, the fake vulnerability, the victim playing, all of it becomes visible once you've seen it enough times. And what's even more powerful is that you don't have to fight them. You don't have to expose them. You don't have to prove anything. Because once an empath truly sees the pattern can never control them the same way again. One of the biggest misunderstandings people have about an empath's comeback is that they imagine it's going to look loud. They imagine it's going to be dramatic. They imagine one day you're going to walk back into the rooms that underestimated you, and suddenly everyone who ignored you, doubted you, used you, or played with your heart is finally going to see what they lost. And if we're being honest, most empaths have had that thought at some point. After everything you've been through, after all the times you stayed loyal while other people played games, after all the emotional labor you carried without being appreciated, part of you naturally wanted that moment. You wanted people to finally understand your value. You wanted the ones who took your kindness for weakness to feel what it's like when that kindness is no longer available to them. But as an empath matures, something very unexpected begins to happen. The desire for revenge starts disappearing. And not because what happened suddenly stops mattering. It's because your energy starts becoming too valuable to spend on people who are committed to misunderstanding you in the first place. You start realizing that revenge still keeps you emotionally connected to the people who hurt you. It still gives them space in your mind. It still allows them to influence your peace, your focus, and your direction. And eventually, a deeper kind of intelligence starts emerging inside of you. One that understands that true power is not proving anything to anyone. True power is building a life that no longer revolves around old wounds. This is where the empath's comeback becomes truly dangerous because it stops being emotional and starts becoming intentional. You stop wondering whether certain people regret losing access to you. You stop imagining conversations that will probably never happen. You stop mentally replaying betrayals, trying to understand why someone did what they did. Instead, your focus shifts towards something much bigger. You start protecting your peace with the same intensity you once protected other people's feelings. Peace no longer feels boring. Solitude no longer feels lonely. Boundaries no longer feel selfish. In fact, what once felt uncomfortable begins feeling natural. You stop seeing your sensitivity as something that made life harder, and you begin seeing it as the very thing that taught you what deserves access to your heart and what never did. This comeback was never about becoming cruel. It was never about making people suffer, exposing everyone who hurt you, or proving your worth to people who refused to see it. It was about becoming emotionally unavailable to manipulation. It was about building a life so aligned, so peaceful, and so rooted in self-respect that the people who once brought confusion into your life simply no longer fit into it. And that's what makes an empath's comeback so powerful. It's not loud enough for everyone to notice immediately. But for the people who once had access to your energy, it's impossible to ignore. For a long time, being an empath felt like carrying a gift that the world didn't fully understand. In many environments, your ability to feel deeply, read people accurately, and sense what wasn't being said often made you feel out of place. In relationships, people sometimes called you too emotional. In work environments, your sensitivity was often mistaken for weakness. In social circles, your awareness of tension, dishonesty, or hidden motives sometimes made you feel like you were seeing things nobody else could, or worse, like you were the problem for noticing them in the first place. But something is changing now, not just inside of empaths, but in the world itself. People are starting to realize that confidence without emotional intelligence creates unstable leadership. Intelligence without empathy creates shallow relationships. Ambition without integrity creates success that looks good on the outside but feels empty underneath. And as more people begin waking up to that truth, the very qualities that once made empaths feel different are starting to become some of the most valuable traits a person can have. Because think about what the world is quietly craving right now. People are exhausted from fake confidence. They're tired of conversations that sound polished but feel empty. They're tired of relationships built on convenience, workplaces built on ego, and communities built on appearances. More than ever, people are searching for authenticity, emotional safety, honesty, trust, and leadership that actually makes them feel seen rather than controlled. And whether the empath realizes it or not, this is exactly what they naturally bring. And if you're still here, still watching, I genuinely want to thank you. And if this message found you at the right time, then maybe your comeback isn't something far away. Maybe it's already started in the quiet choices you've been making, the boundaries you've been setting, and the version of yourself you're finally refusing to betray. The comeback always begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself. Whatever happens next, trust that you are not behind, you are not forgotten, and you are definitely not finished. Some of the strongest chapters of your life don't begin when everything makes sense. They begin when you finally realize your value and never negotiate it again.